What's up, everyone? John Rettinger from Techno Buffalo here. I got my bad lighting and my opinionated hoodie on. It's time for a rant. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm generally a pretty light-hearted, happy guy, but I can be a bit of a curmudgeon. I have curmudgeon-y symptoms and syndromes and opinions, and I test a lot of mobile phones, and oftentimes that curmudgeon-ness can come out. You might remember a few months ago my Apple iOS rant, where I talked about iOS becoming stale, how the notification systems were incredibly annoying, and the lock screen borderline useless. Well, with Google I/O upon us, it's time to focus in on Android and talk about what they're doing well, what they're not doing well, and what I think they can do to improve. And let me know whether or not you agree or disagree. First, Android and iOS are always going to be entwined. It's hard as a consumer electronics journalist or as a consumer in general to not compare the two. I love that Android exists, just like I love that iOS exists. I think a company is only driven to succeed and innovate as far as their competition will take them. When you don't have competition in the mobile marketplace, you stagnate, like we had with the original Windows Mobile. I'm not talking Windows Phone 7, I'm talking the old school Windows Mobile with the stylus and the start menu and the little scroll bars you had to scroll through, and the old Palm operating system, which was fresh when it first came out, but a decade later was still the same. So I think that Apple and I think that Google push each other to be better. And whether or not you're an Android fan or an Apple fan doesn't matter. Competition is great for the consumer. Whenever companies compete, the consumers definitely win. So, as long as Apple exists, Google's going to continue to innovate with their mobile platform. And as long as the reverse is true, I would say what it was, but I'm going to get confused with what I just said. That would be true as well. But Android is not infallible, just like Apple is not infallible, and there are a lot of things that Android could do to improve. One of the biggest complaints and problems I have with Android isn't necessarily Google's fault, perhaps it lies with the carriers, it's fragmentation. I'm looking off over there, you guys can't see, but I have a few phones, all of which are running very different versions of Android. Some are running a tablet operating system, some are running Gingerbread, some Froyo, some are running older versions of Eclair and all kinds of dessert-themed deliciousness. But there is that fragmentation occurring in Android. Now that may be because Google's continuing to innovate so quickly. They're coming out with a new operating system about every 6 months or so. I've got one of the newer devices here which is just released, but surprisingly isn't running the newest version of Google's Phone OS Gingerbread. This is running Froyo, although the screen is pretty awesome and large on it. Kind of just like to look at it. Okay, but that aside, it's getting very tough for developers to continue to support new versions of the operating system and also support older versions of the operating system. Certainly, new APIs are being offered, new screen resolutions are coming out, new sizes, and all kinds of business. I believe it was Rovio, the makers of Angry Birds, that said it was getting more and more difficult to support Android. Certainly the newer versions of Google's operating systems are essentially going to prevail and be more prevalent and other fancy P words, but people are still going to have those older versions of Android. I got my mom, for example, perfect example, an Android phone. She's not the most technologically advanced person in the world. She likes to learn, she's trying, but she's not going to know how to update her phone. Now granted, she's got a version that's not even going to be updated to Froyo, the phone she's got, but she has an older version of Android. She likes to try and download apps, but she's never going to upgrade her phones because she doesn't know how. And there are a lot of folks out there that are like that. They get a phone, they figure the phone, when they pick it up, day one is the same phone that they're going to have, same operating system that they're going to have 2 years later when their contract is up. Now a lot of people out there have more knowledge about their phones, and they're more educated consumers. They know when over-the-air updates come out, they know how to root, they know how to jailbreak, they know how to customize, they know how to tweak packages, which is kind of funny to say, and all the rest of that, but a lot of people don't. And as long as the carriers rather, are offering older versions of phones and they aren't pushing these updates and getting them right in front of you, you're going to have a hard time supporting multiple operating systems and legacies. And I know this video is a bit long-winded, and I probably could have just said, fragmentation's a big problem with Android, and put my hands together. And it is a big problem with Android. That's all I'm going to say about that. Fragmentation's annoying. I don't like it in Cake. I don't like when my Cake comes in fragments. I don't like when my operating systems come in fragments. And it's very tough support. And that's sort of the Windows versus PC thing too, or Windows versus Mac thing, rather. You have a platform like Google, which is not vertically integrated. Google makes the operating system. Companies can build on top of it, customize it, tweak it. They make the hardware, and Google says, we just made the software. Or something like Apple, they control the hardware all the way through, but you get a very limited product choice. So you've got just an iPhone. Whether or not it's a 4 or 3GS doesn't really matter. Whereas on Google, you can pick a 4.5-inch screen now, which is kind of awesome. You can pick a 4.3-inch screen, you can get a 3.7-inch screen, a 3.5-inch screen, a 4-inch screen. You have a ton of different choices. You can get dual-core processors, single-core processors made from a myriad of different manufacturers. You've got a little bit of choice in there, but with that choice comes variance, and the variance becomes harder and harder to support. So a bit rambly. Do you agree, disagree? Do you think fragmentation is overrated, inflated, and should I shut my face hole? If you guys are still watching, just curious what you guys have to say. I'm John Rant80 from Techno Buffalo, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.